Like they call it the doghouse.
I want to talk about this mythical, amazing Colby Covington, who supposedly would be champion if Kamaru Usman didn't exist. This guy, and I'll be honest, I don't really like going in on fighters because I respect any fighter who goes in the ring or the octagon, gives it all. It's the reason why you look at my videos. I never really go hard on fighters because I don't feel the need to. The worst one I think I ever went in was Tyson Fury, and even then I don't go crazy because I have a lot of respect for fighters. However, Colby Covington has in his past, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, has said some very dark stuff about a lot of people. Said it about Kamaru Usman, talking about him and his strike. He's from Africa. Talked about Usman's old manager dying of a heart attack and stuff. And spoke about Leon Edwards' dad in the press conference, talking about how he's in hell. This guy is probably the fakest fighter there is, simply because he plays a character and people kind of excuse this. Colby Covington has this defense mechanism where when he's trash talk, he mumbles his words anyway. He doesn't really get his trash talk out that well anyway. He obviously says his rehearsed lines, but when he has to kind of improvise, that's when he stumbles and that's when he goes personal. So didn't really surprise me in Covington, but Covington, like Edward says, good fighter, dirty human being. That's why I have no problem dissecting this guy, who's one of the biggest frauds I think I've seen in mixed martial art history. Everybody talks about how he is this unbelievable fighter, this cardio king. That car didn't do anything against Edwards. And you want to talk about this guy's resume, let's just go through it. Because I think people massively overrate this guy. So if you actually look, if we go further back first of all, let's go his first loss in the UFC to Wally Alves. From there, because that was UFC 294, 194, December 12th, 2015, on the Aldo McGregor card. So we're going back here. Lost that fight early in his career, so obviously. He then got the win against Jonathan Munier via rear naked choke. Beat Max Griffin, obviously TKO, which is a shock because all the fact that he ever finishes. He then beat Brian Barberena, then beat Dong Kun Kim. And then this is when his resume started to slowly pick up. First of all, beats Damian Maia. Good win. Beats RDA. Another good win. You're thinking, Robbie Lawler. Legend. What a great win. Then loses to Kamaru Usman. Then beats Tyron Woodley. Then loses to Usman again. Then beats Jorge Masvidal. And now just lost to Leon Edwards. So going through it, I want to start from Damian Maia onwards, because that's when it really... The other ones are kind of just him building his career. Damian Maia. Now, at the time, we're talking 2017 here, so this is 6 years ago, about to be 7, with almost into the new year. Damian Maia is, again, an incredible jiu-jitsu practitioner, but old man. And at the time when Damian Maia, he is currently 46, and like I said, 6 years ago, he was 40 when he fought Colby Covington. So Covington did great. He beat a 40-year-old in a fight which, if anybody watches it, it was so lackluster. Him and Usman kind of did the same thing, but Usman just was a bit more powerful and overwhelmed by it, whereas Covington just tried to use his pace and just land a little ground and pound shots. He talks about how he left him in a pool of his own blood. It's impressive, but the man's 40, so how great. And then Damian Maia, again, incredible fighter, but on the feet, he's nothing spectacular, never was. His main strength is in jiu-jitsu, and he's incredible at that, but nothing else. He then beat Rafael dos Anjos. Good win. RDA, legendary fighter. But, again, he likes to talk about the whole thing about lightweights. First of all, the fact that RDA was able to take him down was crazy. But then, if you actually look at that fight, first of all, in terms of significant strikes, crazy thing here is RDA landed 105 out of 198. Colby landed 99 out of 296. So, RDA had a better strike percentage than him. And then in the fight, RDA was able to take him down. I think he took him down, had a control time of 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I'm going off the stats. I haven't watched the fight in a while. But I remember Covington was able just to overwhelm him with his pace like he does to everybody. Pretty much. But this is a lightweight, Rafael dos Anjos, who has lost to Kamaru Usman, and lost to Leon Edwards. Again, good win, but in hindsight, and I mean it's the nicest way possible because RDA is a legendary fighter, but everybody beats him nowadays. He's just not at the level he once was, you know. Also lost to Khabib, lost to a lot of guys, RDA. Again, a great fighter, but just not at the level he once was. He then fought Robbie Lawler. Now, this is the hilarious thing about Colby Covington, this fake narrative that him and his fans tried to point out. Robbie Lawler was washed at the time when he fought Colby Covington. And don't let them tell you anything different. Robbie Lawler, when he fought Colby Covington, had fought Ben Askren. Yes, an incredible resurgence almost from Lawler against Askren, who would, well, that was obviously his debut. But if we look at what Ben Askren went on to do, not tapped by Masvidal, choked out by Maia, he was finished, washed at the point, Ben Askren, when he came into the UFC. So, what Lawler did, I don't get me wrong, Lawler did amazing against Ben Askren, but it wasn't anything special. And then you look at what happened since he fought Colby Covington. He then lost to Neil Magny, Robbie Lawler. He beat Nick Diaz, who was already in the retirement home at that point. He had a bit of a gut on him. Was nothing special beating Nick Diaz. Then beat Brian Barberena and then went out in the legendary way, beating Nico Price. Now, legend Robbie Lawler. We all know this. One of the epitome of a real fighter in this game, and was able to have amazing resurgence later on in his career and win the belt. But Robbie Lawler was washed by the time Colby fought him. Let's not act like he was doing anything special. When he fought him, Colby had fought him. He'd already come off of 2 losses to Askren and to RDA. And RDA, who Colby had just beat to get the interim belt. And for whatever reason, this was an amazing victory according to people. He was able to put a pace on Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler wasn't the fighter he was. This was a nothing victory to me. It wasn't anything special. Robbie Lawler is a legend. If you're being a prime Robbie Lawler, it's a completely different thing, but you didn't. He then fought Kamaru Usman, one of my favourite fights ever, that first Usman and Covington fight. Both guys went back and forth. But once again, Covington talked himself up. He looked nervous on that walkout if you watched him the first Usman fight. He looked terrified. Went in there. I had it 2-2 going into the 5th, but it was a very close fight. Covington performed admirably, and it was a close fight between those two. But in the end, it was a close fight. And I remember at the time, I think it was something like their records were identical, and they'd almost beaten basically the same guys in the same kind of way. They were so identical at that point. I remember picking Usman to win simply because he was just a bit bigger, and I felt the size would be a thing. In the end, Colby got his jaw broken in the 5th round and got TKO'd. People say, oh, it was a bad stoppage. Right, let's just say it was. He's losing that fight anyway. He got knocked down and dropped twice in that fight. He wasn't doing anything to come back in that fight. If anything, even if Mark Goddard didn't stop it there, he would have stopped it eventually because Usman wasn't slowing down and was going to knock him out regardless. He was done, Covington. The fact this guy got dropped twice and already had a broken jaw, what more did you think was going to happen? So, again, nothing. It was a good performance, and I think Covington went out and showed that, yeah, he's a solid competitor. And at that point, him and Usman were the 2 best guys of the division. But that was his big chance, and he did not win. He then came back and fought Tyron Woodley. Now, December 2019 was when he fought Usman. He came back to September 19, 2020. Now, COVID happened, so we'll forgive him for not fighting that often. So he fought Tyron Woodley. Now you're thinking, Tyron Woodley. Forget the whole Jake Paul thing for a second, but Tyron Woodley. He beat Robbie Lawler to win the belt. This guy at one point was one of the best champions. People were saying at one point, could he match GSP for being up there as one of the greatest welterweights of all time? Well, let's look at Woodley's record before fighting Colby Covington. Before Covington, he had fought Gilbert Burns, lost. Fought Kamaru Usman, lost. He came off a 2-fight losing streak. Usman and Burns are good fighters. He didn't just lose to both of those guys. He got dominated by both of them. He was fighting Covington like he did with Lawler, a washed Tyron Woodley. Don't get me wrong, Woodley was a great fighter in his heyday, but he wasn't that. It was clear, and you saw that in the fight. Yeah, it was a dominant performance from Covington because Woodley had nothing there. There was nothing left for Woodley. He was done in that fight, and I think it's no surprise to me what Covington did. Everybody could see what was going to happen in that fight. Again, nothing spectacular. And then if you want to look after he fought Woodley, now this is where it gets ridiculous. September 19, he fought. He sits out for a year and fights Kamaru Usman November 6, 2021. So he got gifted a title shot simply because he had an entertaining first fight with Usman. And let's not try and act like Covington is an amazing job at selling these fights. The pay-per-views that Covington does are average. I don't know how much he gets paid, but he isn't one of the most highest paid fighters in the UFC. This guy is, he talks a lot, but it's not as if he gets worldwide interest. It wasn't like a Khabib McGregor thing where McGregor had built his profile and just got even worse with the trash talk. Covington, he tries to sell the fight, but ultimately it's not as if him and him and Usman it's like a crazy rivalry and he was talking and everybody was interested. Him and Masvidal was different because those two are friends. This was, again, Covington spoke, but for whatever reason, they gave him a title shot. And he performed terribly in those first 2 rounds. The same exact way he performed here. And he blamed ring rust. Again, you got ring rust because you sat out. And this is what I'm saying about Covington. People want to talk about this guy. He said before he'll fight anybody. First of all, they had this whole thing with Khamzat as well. I'm not saying 100% this is the case. I don't think Colby wanted to fight Khamzat because I think he knew what Chimaev was. Colby can't deal with a guy that big who can wrestle the way Chimaev can. You look at what he's able to do with Usman Chimaev in that first round. I know it was a short notice fight, but the fact he was able to hold Usman down for as long as he did shows you if he does that to a guy like Usman who's as big as he is, what's he going to be able to do to Colby? And he also hits, I think, a lot harder than Usman. Even though Usman has got that straight knockout power, I think Chimaev naturally is the bigger puncher out of the two. And I just think Colby didn't want it. And you saw this, I think, in many occasions, Colby doesn't really like to fight that often. And because of that, he seems to still get title shots. I don't understand the logic of what Dana White does. However, we'll get into that later. So he fights Usman second time. Embarrassing performance in the first 2 rounds. Came back, rallied, but still lost the fight. It wasn't a robbery. Usman won, I think, the 5th. I had it. So I think I give Colby 3 and 4. So Usman did enough to win, plus a knockdown as well in the round 2. He then, we're talking about November 6th, 2021. He then fights in March 22, Covington. So this is the most active this guy's probably been. He then fought Jorge Masvidal. Stylistically a perfect fight for him. But the beef was there and it made sense. And I wasn't mad at this fight, I liked it. And Covington dominated. In terms of his performance was great. However, was it a standout? Did he finish him? No. Colby's last finish was 2016. That is how long it's been since this guy has been able to finish anybody in a mixed martial arts fight. I remember speaking, he was saying to Usman in the first fight about how he hasn't finished nobody. This guy leaves room to talk. He has not finished. The amount of times you see that flipping spinning back fist on his highlight when they're trying to hyper fight is hilarious. It's the only finish he has. Against Masvidal, he did well, but he also got dropped. I think it was the 4th round. It was lackluster, that fight. Nothing crazy happened. So what does Colby do? Then after that, funnily enough, he calls out Dustin Poirier, a lightweight, and says, let's fight. Again, we're talking about this guy being some great fighter. He wants to fight a guy one division below. A guy used to fight at 145. To me, I didn't understand that one. People talk about the beef between those two. Poirier and Covington had beef, but Covington's got fucking beef with everybody. I don't see a guy who he doesn't have beef with, so it didn't make sense that to me. You may as well fight John Jones if you're doing that, and you want a Jon Jacek, and after people at ATT. So he beats Masvidal, and then he fought Leon Edwards this weekend. He sat out for over a year. March 22, he fought Masvidal. He's now fought Edwards December 2023, and he's talking about ring rust. What do you expect? You sat out for that long, begging for a title shot, and for whatever reason, Dana gave it to him. The reason he gave it to him, I believe, is because he was about to sue Masvidal, because obviously Masvidal punched him that time. I think it was in Miami or wherever it was. And I think they didn't want them to sue Masvidal at the time. I think Masvidal was still a UFC fighter, so they didn't want to get sued. So they said, you know what? If you don't sue, we'll give you a title shot. That's what I think happened. Because Covington literally did nothing to earn this title shot. This is why I say this guy's got one of the fakest legacies I've ever seen. He has His best win, if you look at his resume, Masvidal, who had already lost, and this is one I want to say about Masvidal as well. If we're going off this is the same Masvidal who came off losing to Kamaru Usman twice in a row, first time decision, and the fight before he fought Covington, he got knocked out cold. This is the great resume we're talking about. A washed up Woodley, a Masvidal who came off two fights like he's lost, and a Robbie Lawler who was washed, RDA washed, Damian Maia 40 years old. This is the supposed great fight that a lot of people back. This guy, his trash talk is horrible for one. I don't believe there's anything about Colby Covington that's, redeeming at all. His fighting style, he's a good fighter, but he's not great. And he has froze every single time he's got to that big moment. The 5th round, Usman was the champion. He was pushing it because he wanted to beat Covington. And that's what you saw, a man's will taking over another. Usman said, sometimes there's some athletes who have to accept or live with knowing that there's another athlete who existed who was better than them. That's what it was with Usman. And that is what it is with Edwards. If you want to talk about this welterweight era, we'll see what Edwards does. At the moment, Usman's the number one in this era. Then I'd say Edwards. I know Edwards beat Usman, so it doesn't really make sense. But ultimately, Usman still has the body of work. It's then Covington 3, and it potentially could be 4. Because he hasn't fought Gilbert Burns. He hasn't fought Bilal Muhammad. Didn't fought Kamza. Didn't fight Ratmanov. Didn't fight Wonderboy. Back when Edwards is a contender, never fought him. And he's lost to him now, so now you know what happened. This guy, because of his ego and thinking that he was bigger than he was, Colby is not a big name. He's not a big star. He doesn't attract the viewers that the way I think he thinks he does and the way people think he does. Colby Covington has one of the fakest resumes and legacies I have ever seen out of any mixed martial arts ever. He is as overrated as I've ever seen. His wrestling is substandard. You look at his way he takes people down. He just shoots. There's no real quickness to the way he shoots for a takedown. It's not as if he's crazy strong so he gets you down. There's no real crazy techniques about it. It's all substandard what he does. Talk about his cardio being his main weapon. If that's something I don't want to say you're born with it, but it's just something you have. You have good cardio or you don't. Where's the skill in that, in having good cardio? It's a little bit like, there's no skill in being a fast sprinter. It's just something you're born with. Covington has nothing. His striking is substandard. His wrestling is nothing special. There's never been anything about Covington that's been that great, but I give him respect. He's been able to talk his way into getting people to believe that he's something amazing. He's a good fighter. That is it. He's never been a great fighter. He's never been championship caliber. And I think he's shown he lost to Usman twice and now he's lost to Edwards. I think he would lose to Gilbert Burns. I don't know how Bilal is because Bilal's striking is a bit iffy. He would have lost to Kamzat. And I'll be honest, there isn't really much I see for Covington anymore. I think you should retire or just take a fight that you know you win. Ultimately, I used to talk about Wonderboy, for example. Wonderboy would be a good way to go out, but this is just, again, Colby Covington has one of the fakest resumes. And for a man who spoke as much crap as this guy did about Leon Edwards, his dad, about Usman's manager, he really has nothing to show for it. Talking about McGregor. McGregor had talent. McGregor won 2 belts. He backed it up. He was special. Covington isn't that. Covington, I understand he had to sell himself as a character to try and get people to watch his fights. And don't get me wrong, for a moment I liked him. But again, when you speak all this rubbish, and the Edwards one was what really turned me off. You speak about the man's dad who died. This is what you get. You lose a fight where you put in the most pathetic, embarrassing performance I have ever seen from any fighter in any title fight. You spoke all that and you froze. It's a little bit like, I think Chris Eubank Jr. had this in boxing at times where he had a big game, he spoke a big game and he felt like he was confident, but ultimately when it came down to it, he wasn't. He was inside scared. Covington is scared when he fights. You can see it. He was scared of Usman in the second fight. That's why he didn't throw any punches. He was scared of Edwards. He wasn't willing to exchange because he knew if he made a mistake, Edwards would counter him. He knew if he overextended through a crazy punch, that head kick was waiting. Edwards' boxing's crisp. It was waiting there for him. And this is what he does. He picks fights and tries to big them up. Colby Covington is, like I said, he's a decent fighter, but there's nothing special about him. He would not be a champion because I don't believe, one, I don't think he has the skill to be a champion. I will need neither the adaptability. He hasn't evolved since he beat RDA to win the interim belt. He's the same fighter. Usman has evolved. Edwards has evolved. He's not. And I think this is a good example of a man who believes that because he has one trait that's so good, he doesn't need to work on the others. If you'd worked on your striking, who's his trainers? Again, he left ATT. There were great coaches there. If you were willing, I understood the character thing, but if you were willing just to stay relaxed and maybe explain to them, okay, I'm trying to do this thing, trying to sell myself, maybe then they would have still let you train, but you got kicked out of there. You didn't go to any well-known MMA gym because I don't think any of them would have him. And this is the problem with Colby. He put his character over his MMA career. He oversold himself. He thought he was this big cash cow. You're not. McGregor, obviously we know is a big name. Khamzat's a bigger name. I'd say Paddy Pimblett's a bigger name. Kamaru Usman, I would argue, is a bigger name. Israel Adesanya is a bigger name. John Jones. I could keep going. There's so many guys who have a bigger name than Colby Covington. So I hope all this was worth it because I don't really think it's done much for his career at all. Yes, he was going to get cut. That promo was good. You could just left it at that. But then he goes too far, Colby. It wasn't like Chael Sonnen. Chael to me never went crazy over the line. Chael was entertaining. Colby isn't Chael. Colby takes it way too far. And to me, eventually, I always believe you put that out, you're going to get it back. I don't believe in karma, but I'm not shocked that he lost this fight. And again, he got outclassed by the superior fighter, the superior mixed martial artist, the same way he got outclassed by the much superior fighter in Kamaru Usman. And he'll get outclassed against any good welterweight because the sport's passed him by. He's an old man now in the sport. He has nothing left. And to me, Colby Covington, good, but not great. And one of the biggest, I want to say, frauds in MMA, has one of the most overrated, bloated resumes I've ever seen in my life. It's padded as all hell. There's nothing special. His record, if you go all over, is 17-4. There's nothing great there. Again, I don't usually go into fighters, but with Colby, I have no problem going on him. He's a nothing fighter. There's nothing special about Colby. There never was anything special about him. Again, you talk about, he's got a great resume. If he wasn't here, Usman wasn't here, he'd be champion. Edwards just showed you that ain't the case because he's not even as good as Leon Edwards or Usman. I would argue, is he as good as the likes of Gilbert Burns, even skill-wise? Burns can hit hard. Burns has got great jiu-jitsu. I'm not sure, but yeah. Great performance from Edwards. Oh no, good performance from Edwards. Boring fight, we'll be honest. Nobody likes that fight, but sometimes when only one guy really comes to fight, Edwards coasts in fight. We know this. He doesn't really have a crazy output. I think for Edwards, next in his career, I would like to see him develop a bit more killer instinct. Maybe try and go for finishes. Let's say Usman did, but either way though, I'd be interested. Him and Ratmanoff would be a good fight, Edwards. I think he'll beat Bilal again as well. I don't really see many people who can really give him that many issues. Probably Shavkat's the only one, but either way, good performance from Edwards. Covington, go WWE, do whatever, but now your time is done. This era of welterweight is done. The likes of Usman, Masvidal, Covington are done. Usman was a great champion. Masvidal had that one shiny moment with the Askren and was a star at one point, but it faded out. And Covington was none of those two. So yeah, just my thoughts, and until next time.